we always say we are trying to transform, or not even transform, is connect to that human-centered leadership, because it has been lost. It has been lost in the day-to-day. It has been lost in the technical aspect of the business. It has been lost in the supposed ROI. Do you trust yourself in the work that you're doing?
What if I told you that the same mindset that builds championship teams also builds an extraordinary life? The same discipline that drives elite performance to greatness is the discipline that unlocks a longer, stronger, and more resilient future. This is where peak health meets peak performance, where we explore the science of longevity and the mindset of greatness. Because your legacy isn't just what you leave behind, it's what you show up with every single day. This is the Legacy and Longevity Podcast. I'm Zach Dancel, your host. Welcome back to the Legacy and Longevity Podcast. Today we are talking about leadership, and leadership that actually works in the real world. Joining us today is Anadel Alberti. She's an executive coach, a leadership strategist, and the founder of Audaciously Authentic. Annadel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Zach, for having me. I'm very excited for our conversation today.
No, I'm super excited. I think leadership is something that is more and more lost, especially since COVID and everything's become virtual, the human connection. We've kind of drifted away, and we're seeing a lot of people trying to go off and do their own things, right? I think there's a big piece that's missing of this concept of doing things together, doing things as a team, because that's truly, in my opinion, what drives us as people and as a community and as groups further along the path that we want to go in the future, right? The saying goes, right? If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. So I think talking about leadership can't be talked about enough. But before we get into all that, I really want to understand and want the people to understand your origin story, right? Like where you started. How did you get to establishing your firm of Audaciously Authentic, and really what brought that to light?
Right. Well, Zach, I'm gonna make the long story short, but I'm originally from Dominican Republic, and I left when I was 17. I studied in New York. Now I'm in South Florida. And while I was doing my studies, I started trying to analyze what was it that I wanted to truly focus on. I came from a society where you had to pick one thing and one thing only. And then I was, okay, so I decided to go into business. Like, okay, I'll go into business. And then I started navigating into communications and then marketing. And then I did a couple of things. And then I along the way, I met one of my, I would say one of the teachers that marked my life. She was a marketing teacher. And she always said, just go follow your heart and do whatever makes you happy. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Right? At 17, what does that even mean? So I kept on going and searching. I graduated, I came down to South Florida, and I got my first official corporate job, right? I did do some internships in big corporations in New York, but when I came down to South Florida, I had been going through so many changes, adapting, and I hadn't realized that I was missing a lot what I knew from before, right? I left when I was 17, and it was like, okay, starting over. And then starting over again when I moved to South Florida. When I started in corporate, I dealt with a lot of people. I started from like a mini like healthcare center, working with patients 65 over, and I started getting to know their stories and how everything worked and how lonely they were. There wasn't like truly a community, and we created that community at the center. Then I worked with the doctors alongside them and with the administration. Then I moved up and did my master's, and I started seeing or feeling the lack of many tools that I wish I had at that moment. Maybe effective communication, or maybe how to deal with stress, or how to manage loneliness, how to even just relate to people that weren't necessarily from my, let's say, they were in another level, right? And I'm like, okay, how do I do this? I didn't have the tools. And I think that stuck into my subconscious in a sense. And as I kept growing in that corporate ladder, I ended up in an leaving that, going to an agency, an ad agency, then starting an entrepreneurship for supporting some friends in their business. And when I left all that, I said, what now? Right. And I moved on to coaching. So that's when I feel that everything really started to take place. I did wellness coaching, stress management coaching, executive coaching, everything, you name it, all those certifications. And it wasn't every time I did one of those, it wasn't necessarily for me to put it into practice with others. It was because I needed it at the moment. How do I cope with stress? How do I cope with, like I told you, loneliness? How do I cope with communicating with others? How do I deal with all this? So I started gaining these tools and putting it into practice. And that's how the company came about. And now we serve a small and mid-sized organizations in developing, right, their teams and their leaders, and how to be more in focus on their organizational well-being, let's say, right? So it's that triad of leadership development, team alignment, and organizational well-being that we're bringing into organizations. But that's the origin. It was more because of me trying to look for answers and tools, and then, okay, what's my purpose? And when I define or found my purpose, it was okay, now we're going to apply it and integrate it with others, and that way we can transform at least one person at a time.
Yeah. Talk to us about the name. Why Audaciously Authentic?
Well, throughout that period of time, I kind of lost myself, and I wasn't being authentic. I was adapting to other people's way of how they wanted me to act, how they wanted me to perform, and I was compliant. And then I decided, when I was able to step out of that, and I saw what was the missing puzzle, the missing piece of the puzzle, I realized that I wasn't being authentic enough, or I wasn't being authentic. I wasn't being myself, and I started going back to my little Annadel, who loved to just be open and talk to people and connect with people without even thinking what others needed to say or thought about me. And that's why I was okay. So that's a piece of the puzzle. And you mentioned something at the beginning of COVID and how people were, more lonely, or they were working on their own and they weren't just communicating. And I'm like, okay, and people are not trusting or being authentic. They're just, again, adapting to what is, or staying on their lane and being, it's okay, I'll do what I have to do, and that's it. You tell me what to do. Or other people just leading in a way that it's not necessarily the way to build trust. I'm like, okay, so being authentic means speaking your truth, being open and effectively communicating, trusting yourself enough that what you have to say and the value that you have is important enough for to share with others. And then audaciously is just to have the audacity to do things and to just show up.
Why do you think you were not authentic? Were you afraid of confrontation? Were you comfortable, right? A lot of people seek comfort, right? Because that is a place where people feel like they can't mess up, or they're not going to take a risk because they're comfortable in the position that they are, and that's their safe spot, right? They feel safe, because anything outside of that spot is potential risk, which could end in a failure, a no, a rejection that most people are afraid to confront.
I could tell you a bunch of things, Zach, but bottom line, it comes down to one of the biggest limiting beliefs that I've had to work on for a very long time. And I can say it out loud because I know that it's present for a lot of people, maybe if they don't see it right now, but it's the limiting belief of not being enough. So I thought I wasn't enough. So I pretended to be maybe somebody else that adapted to other people's way of viewing me or things. And that's where authenticity was lacking, because that's bottom line limiting belief. So go to your limiting belief and probably you'll get a lot of answers.
Yeah, no, I think being authentic, especially with social media, right? It's rare to come by, um, and it's rare to come by for to your point, right? There could be so many reasons, But being authentic, right, it's not something that you do that's necessarily going to make you liked. It's not going to make you the most popular, right? I always think in my head, I every day I try to be a good man, not a nice guy, right? The whole saying about being a good man versus a nice guy. A nice guy acts out of the need for approval. He's often nice because he lacks the strength for confrontation, or there's something dangerous, or just having the courage to be honest, especially in a social environment. Especially around people that you don't know. But being a good man, right, is acting on duty and discipline, on what he believes is true and what he's trying to provide, protect, is a big difference, right? That I think a lot of people, because of the confrontation, because of they might not be liked or they might be viewed a certain way, they're okay with being nice versus being the good, right? And there's a big difference. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that, like what you see in the workspace when you're working with executives, right? Where do you see the biggest mistakes in these big corporations when they're trying to transform, when they're trying to grow and scale, that's stopping them from doing that?
Listen, Zach, we see a lot of lack of trust in themselves as leaders and in their teams. So just recently, we were working with an executive who was, during the process that we were doing with the insights interviews, we did a bunch of things for the company: diagnostic testing, psychometric evaluations, you name it, we did it. And in a conversation, it came up. We got it to a point where this executive said, "It's just that I don't trust them." And the following question was, "Do you trust yourself in the work that you're doing?" So what we see is a lot of lack of trust in themselves and in their teams. We see a lot of misalignment, a lot of miscommunication, a lot of executives pretending not to be themselves, or not being themselves, because they understand that they have to fulfill a model of what this executive needs to be, and then it's not truly connecting to their teams. So it's getting to that. That's why we always say we are trying to transform, or not even transform, it's connect to that human-centered leadership, because it has been lost. It has been lost in the day-to-day. It has been lost in the technical aspect of the business. It has been lost in the supposed ROI. And we were talking about this previously. 73% of the investment goes on technical skills. But what essential skills or soft skills, how many people know them? They're rarely like second thought. Like they're in a checkbox kind of way. Whereas if you see the numbers and you see the companies that are truly investing in their teams, in their leaders, in their people, and they're focused on the human before everything else, their return on investment is way higher. So those are the things that we see the most, honestly, and a lack of critical thinking. So that's something else, right?
Yeah.
Let's make decisions. We don't care. This is the way to go. But how is that going to impact your team? How is that going to impact the operations of your business if you haven't even opened the floor to see what is truly going on in the with them and with the people that you're leading? So that those are the things that we see the most.
Okay. So do you see? So I mean, that's the lack of trust, right, is a systemic issue. How do you fix the trust issue?
We start with a person. So we start asking those questions. Do you trust yourself? Right? And we go into within the psychometric evaluations, or things that have happened in the past, or even during the organization like growth. What has happened that has made you feel that you can't trust? Right? Because usually what happens at work is a reflection of what happens in your personal life. It's not that we go deep into therapy or analyzing all this, but we do touch upon some of the things that may change the way that you see things, because you are connecting the dots, right? Our life is not, even though you hear so much, oh, there needs to be a balance and you need to separate your professional life from your personal life. Yes, when it comes to setting boundaries, that is absolutely true. But you do have to understand that whatever you bring into your um sys- like system, professional system, that systemic a connection that exists in your business, is also things that you may bring from your personal life. So when we do that, we look into that. We look into why is there a lack of trust coming from, whether from the team up or from the executive to their teams, or within the human per se, like their persona, their selves. And we usually do like insights, like I said, insights interviews. We really dig deep into what is truly going on. It's not, oh, I don't trust. Where is that coming from? Is that because I don't believe that they're going to do a good job? Or, for example, another executive that wanted to do everything because he knew that by doing everything, everything was going to be perfect. And he wasn't delegating. So what happened? What happens, Zach, when you don't delegate? People start losing trust, right?
Yeah.
Oh, they don't trust me, or he doesn't. Our boss doesn't trust us, or he doesn't believe that we're doing that we can do the job. So we're just gonna sit back and relax, or I'm just gonna hate my job because I'm just showing up here and I'm not being challenged.
What would you what's a piece of traditional leadership advice that you think, to your point, right? Like, people thinking like the whole like not delegating or trying to be perfect, um, waiting for the right time, that you feel does the most harm amongst a corporation, from growth, from scaling. What would you say like that is holding people back?
Believing that you as a leader or as the visionary is the only one that can hold that vision.
So, yeah, I love that because you know it's so much easier, a relief, when you have a team that you can have those deep conversations about that vision, right? About what that future looks like. Because I have, I'm fortunate enough to have quite a bit of that on my team, but that's also because, to your point, right, the trust piece. And I think a large part of that is just the lack of communication, right? Just having those daily conversations, doesn't have to be anything serious, but those constant connections, just little updates here. Hey, how's your day? Hey, just giving the little tidbits here and there where you're slowly starting to build that connection. You're slowly starting to build that trust that makes the world's difference. And then all of a sudden you guys lock in on this vision and it just invigorates that relationship even more. I think that's, there's no way that myself, my dad, or any of the top leadership could be where we're at today if we didn't have that shared vision with so many people amongst our company, to be able to say, we've been around in business for 12 years, right? We've been practicing, this revolutionary medicine that people are just now talking about over the past couple of years. We've been doing this for 12 years, right? And a business just doesn't get by or last for 12 years for no reason, right? There's got to be a purpose behind it. There's clearly been you got to have a good product, right? But you got to have excellent employees who love what they do. They are fully bought in on the mission, right? Because or else you're just going to have a high turnover rate if someone doesn't have that commitment to the mission that you do. Not to say that it's going to be exactly as yours, but they're not going to be around for a while. There's people who've been in this company since the conception, right? There's a bunch. Like, it's not just a couple people, right? So I think I love what you're saying, is that You got to have others around you that have that same vision, who want the same things, because that's only going to push you further. It's only going to help you achieve and accomplish more of the things that you're looking to achieve in life. So it's that's huge.
Absolutely. It's culture, right? It's culture. Like, what's your company's culture? How are you integrating it? How are you building it, right? Because you have so many corporations that have this signs on their walls. And then you speak to the employees, and you even speak to the executives and the top executives, and they don't even know what those words on the wall mean, right? And understanding that we're not the only ones holding the vision, like not being the only ones holding the vision is going to help us multiply the message and the value that we have to give, right? So if the purpose is to get to X amount of people, or is to transform people's lives, or is to impact through our product or our services, okay, how do I do that? I start within my organization. I hear a lot, oh, there's lack of communication, or they just don't want because they're Gen X, Gen Z, Gen whatever, and now, whichever generation, and they put a label on it. And when we go dig down in culture, right? They don't even know what the vision is. They haven't been communicated. And many times those executives are so busy, they have so many things on their plate that they don't take the time to nurture the most important relationship besides with themselves, but with their teams. And that time that is not invested in the team is the one that is going to impact the company either in the short run, mid run, or long run.
Before we continue, I want to share something deeply personal, the real reason my family started Nava Health. Over a decade ago, my mom was on her deathbed. Her organs were failing, and the doctors told us there was nothing they could do except keep her comfortable. In that moment, everything changed. We realized traditional medicine had limits, especially when it came to proactive and preventative root cause medicine built for long term health span and lifespan. At Nava Health, we take a data driven precision approach to longevity. We test over 90 biomarkers to uncover exactly what's happening inside your body, and we build a personalized plan designed around your unique biology. Because fatigue, brain fog, weight gain, they're not random, they're signals. And when you listen, your body can heal. This is functional longevity medicine done right, comprehensive, proactive, and built to help you feel and perform your best at any age. Go to navacenter.com and take control of your health today. Now back to the show.
So you said it earlier, and I want to come back to this because I think it's important, not just professionally but also personally, whether it be at home, whether it be in your relationship, or whether it be about your health, right? But many CEOs, right, they fear on that focusing on the human-centered culture, right, investing into their people potentially means sacrificing the bottom line. How do you prove to them that these two things can actually be linked to increasing the bottom line?
At the end of the day, you're going to have, and if this is statistics, you can look at the numbers, and it is less absenteeism, more productivity, more focus, more efficiency, more connection, more empathy, more outcomes, more teamwork. So everything is going to be in the towards the more, and you're going to have people showing up, right? People are going to show up. People are going to navigate whatever challenge comes their way and comes the organization way, because they're prepared and they're going to have the tools to be able to manage that. If you think about it, 73% of people worldwide is suffering from burnout nowadays. And that might number have had probably it changed this last couple of months.
Yeah, well, let's talk about burnout. I personally, I personally despise the word, like just me personally, because burnout is, I don't think burnout is what, I don't think it's being used the right way. I think burnout, in my eyes, like true burnout, right, is someone who is truly just working so hard every day about what what they're doing, right, where they literally burn out, right? Like they don't take care of themselves. They because they're so focused on what they're doing, that eventually, they kind of just they make themselves sick, right? They lose interest, right? They kind of fall off. I think today's burnout is, in my opinion, is more so people, um, they're not working as hard as what I would consider burnout, in my opinion. I think it's more so people have a lack of interest versus actual burnout. But I'd love to hear what your standpoint.
There's a disconnection. There's a disconnection, like we were mentioning before. A lot of people do work hard and they don't see the results in what they're doing. They don't get the recognition. And I'm not saying, oh, I need a praise every day, right? I need my boss to tell me and whatnot. But they're just there because it's like an automatic pilot. You see, it's like the rat that is going around in circles. That's how people are performing nowadays. I do believe also that there's another part that is not as committed as before, just because they're there to get a paycheck, basically, right? But there is a silent, I would say, group of people that go do their work. They maybe don't take care of themselves, which leads to also being frustrated because of whatever is going on at work. And because they don't have an outlet, right? Taking care of themselves, doing exercise, listening to music, whatever it is, whatever the tools that you want to use. But if you're at your job 24/7, you're connected to a cell phone, your email is everywhere. You don't put boundaries because you feel that if you put boundaries, you're going to get fired, right? So people are acting out of fear, or your boss is not going to understand why you're being disrespectful. These are thoughts that come through people's minds, right? So you end up not sleeping, you end up stressed out, anxious, and depressed, right? So if you want to combine and not put the word burnout because you worked a lot, right? I understand you don't want to associate it with that. Let's look at the framework of stress, anxiety, and depression, and lack of sleep, by all means, which is one of the biggest pandemics in the world, I think, at this moment in time.
Yeah, I mean, I think uh, the anxiety, the depression, the lack of sleep, the lack of connection. I'm not saying that it's not always the company's fault. I think it takes two to tango, right? I think there's a side of, to your point, the silent ones that don't speak up, right, aren't authentic, right, because they're not okay with being in an uncomfortable position, depending on what someone might respond as. People not taking care of themselves, right? Continuously eating a bunch of processed junk, not sleeping, right? Not moving. So just what they're doing internally to their health, right, is already capping on what they're really able to provide, right? They're not able to give that 100%, right? They're only at like 70, 60%. So their level of burnout is going to be much quicker. So I think there's a lot that plays into it. But I do think that, to your point, right, 73% of people being, you said 73?
Yeah. And that was from last year. So I don't know how this year is going to.
So, I mean, I guess the question is, I mean, are 73 people, or 73% of people, I think there's a lot of misdiagnoses in there. Different meanings for different things.
Different meanings for different things. And also, again, those that are speaking up, those that aren't, those that maybe want some change, and those that are living the day by day and not saying a thing, right? So it's again, it's like every percentage. If you look at percentages, you say, how come this number came about? Like what? But who creates the surveys, right? The surveys, they're created by human beings that want certain amount of information or certain type of information to come out of those surveys, right? So If we
Yeah,
go
like
to
these are
data.
truly gold standard human trial controlled studies, right?
Exactly.
To your point, right? Like we could get any number that we want, but no, it's you're constantly hearing it all over the place, right?
Absolutely.
So it's not that it's not true, right? It's more so of a statistic that gives us direction. But also, I think going back to the beginning, um, and a lot of the things that we've already said thus far is what's the leadership in that company look like, right? What's the culture like? What's the communication that you're having on all the different levels of your employees? Um, do they have that connection to the company, to the mission? Do they believe in the core values that you're spewing every single day? Because I believe if people are truly committed to the mission, right, they believe in the vision, they can connect strongly with those core values. There's no way a successful company should be at a 73% burnout rate, right? There's just no way that successful companies can continue to be successful at that level of burnout. So obviously, there's some companies that are doing it very, very well, and then some companies that aren't, right? And those typically kind of tell you and show you who's the successful companies versus who are the failing companies.
And it's very interesting that you say, because it's also a matter of how you see and how do you evaluate if a company is successful or not. We've worked with a lot of successful companies, and when you start digging deep into the ones who move the company and who move the needle every single day, they don't want to be there.
What would you say is the definition of a successful company?
I would say it's a company that is truly connecting with their employees. They're having their ROI, right? They're making it out there, but they're also showing up. They're showing up authentically. And when you speak to your team, or when you speak to someone who works at that organization, they're going to say it's the best place to work. I love it. I enjoy it. I want to go to work every single day. And you find that. Yes, there are days, not all days are going to be perfect. Us as human beings don't have perfect days, right? Even in our personal lives. But it's a company where you can ask anyone, and they're like, "You know what? I love it. I wouldn't leave. I'm here. I've been here for 20 years, right? 25 years, 30 years. I've been here 10 years since the inception, right? And I don't want to leave. That I'm not looking for somewhere else." It's a company where doesn't matter the times, the people, their people want to stay there and want the company, see the company succeed.
No, I completely agree, and it's so true. It's to me at least, it's not about the money. It's not about the accolades. It's not about the cars, the fancy trips. Now, all those things are great. They can be very enjoyable. Um, but to me, what's more important is the lives that you can positively impact, right? Not just for your clients, but for your employees, right?
Absolutely.
What type of influence, right? Influence means nothing if you're not helping somebody else to grow, helping someone else to get better, right? That's legacy, right? You know, your legacy that you leave, it's not going to be measured in what you've been able to accumulate materially, right? But it's more so about who you helped, right? Which I think is the real power. When your presence inspires actions from others, that's the real flex. The real flex. It's something that you're doing, a mission, your company, sparks change, like that type of impact, that type of influence. To me, is what defines success, right? Because money can come and go.
Yep.
Your health can come and go, right? But what are you doing while you have these years left on this planet to make a positive impact, right? A positive influence on others that are around you, right? Your friends, your family, your kids. We were talking about it earlier, right? Just the positive impact and influence that you have on them. You're everything to them. You are their world. They look up to you nonstop. And ultimately, who they become is the values and the culture in the vision that you instilled in them at a very early age and through their childhood.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you talked about influence and legacy and impact. And when, if human beings were to understand that, and we talked about this before, but influencing or being an influencer for others is understanding that we can impact positively or negatively everyone around us by the way that we speak, what we say, what we do it, how we show up. So we have that power. We don't have the power of making others feel one way or the other because we are the ones that decide how to feel about things. And this is another concept on its own. But we do have the power of showing up in a way that truly makes an impact in the people around us. At that 6 degree of separation of what those people are going to do or say because we influence them, right? And that is building your legacy while you're still alive, because that's something else. And you talk about it, we talked about it before, is what is legacy, right? And you talk about it in your podcast all the time. But it's truly living something while we're still alive, right? And then when we're not in this realm or where or whatever you want to call it, is okay, I remember Zach, I remember Annadel. They left this, they said this, they transformed this, they showed up every single day.
No, I 100% agree, and it's, those are the daily decisions that a influencer, an executive has to make every single day, right? And showing up to work. Um, you know, I'm, like myself, whether it's for work, for my kids, for my wife, for my friends or my family, right? A long time ago, I made a decision that I no longer have the choice whether or not to show up or not, right? Like, I don't have an option. Like, I have to show up, right? Like, that's a commitment that I made with myself of who I am as a human being. And all of them know that. Um, it doesn't matter what time that they need to call me, I'm going to answer. And it's just one of those things that type of impact, that how that's created these bonds and relationships that I've built over the years. There's nothing that I would trade for the world for that, because I know, because of what I've done and what I've, said to them and how I've treated my friends and family, they would do the same thing for me. Right. And so it's one of those things where it's reciprocated. And not necessarily because that's necessarily who they are, but they know that's who I am and that I would do it for them. So it's one of those things that I think as a leader, it's truly a privilege to be in a position to lead, to be in a position to be a parent, because, it truly, it's the true definition of seeing who you truly are as a person to your core, right? Like, and it's a battle every single day. It's not easy. But it's one of those things that I love the challenge, right? I love the teachings that I get from it, because I know every single day is just going to make me a better and better person, whether it's good or bad, right? It's just about taking the lessons from that.
But because you're being present and you made a choice. So another one of the greatest gifts that we have as human beings is the power of choice. And many times we avoid making choices because we feel that the choice that we're going to make is right or wrong, right? So we tend to evaluate and not even go deep inside and say, this is the choice that is going to get me from A to Z. And in the process, I know that I'm going to be making a choice that is beneficial because I'm not going to be harming anyone along the way, right? So even as a leader, and even in your day to day as a parent, right? You're going to make choices. We make choices as soon, even deciding if we're going to stand up, wake up or not, right? I'm going to stay in bed or not. That example. But as a leader, is this choice gonna be beneficial for the organization? Is it gonna be beneficial for the team? And is it gonna be beneficial for me? And you analyze and you see the different levels and the impact that you can make. And sometimes you have to make hard decisions. What does that truly mean? So is you defining what does hard decision mean to me, because for everyone it's different, right? But those choices, or that choice that you made, I'm pretty sure that it was very tied into your values, right? And your values are your compass. And when we as humans understand and are clear on our values, then we're going to be able to show up, to leave that legacy, to make choices, because we know that deep down, we're going to be connecting through those values that are also going to connect other people around us.
All right. Well, I got a couple rapid fire questions for you here to close this out. It's something I like doing. It'll just be fun, just quick, rapid answer. First thing that comes to mind, go ahead and throw it out. If you need some time to think about it, it's fine too.
No.
For the owners, the executives, the leaders out there listening, what is the one audacious shift that they can make today to improve their culture?
Listen.
Okay, love that. If you could place one message on a billboard that every burnout executive had to drive past tomorrow morning, what would it say?
It's not them, it's you.
There you go. When it's all said and done, what do you want your legacy to be remembered by?
I want to be remembered by a person who pushed others to tap into their best version and who truly showed up every single day authentically, with my lights and with my shadows, so that others can emulate that. And at the end, that I leave here knowing that my purpose in this world was fulfilled, and that is to live in gratitude and make and help others feel the same way.
Well, Annadel, thank you for coming on and challenging us to, stop playing it safe, right? Start being audacious, right? For those listening, and being a nice leader, who's avoiding those hard conversations, right? It's how you end up in a average culture. And to me, average is the enemy, right? I think average is comfort. It's staying in place. It's not growing. It's not wanting more for yourself or the people around you. So if you want to build a legacy, right, that actually lasts, that you have to have the discipline to be your authentic self, even when it's difficult. You got to have the strength to push through and be in those difficult positions and put yourself in uncomfortable situations, because it's going to happen, right? And it's not to be in a place where you're doing to be liked or to be the most popular, because being authentic, unfortunately, isn't, right? You're going to step on some people's toes. You're going to have some disagreements with people in your company, which is okay, right? Having healthy disagreements is part of growing. It's a part of the process. That's how teams build. It's how teams grow. Because at the end of the day, you guys come together and make that compromise on what's best moving forward is truly what's going to make you stay now and what's truly going to make the difference. So go follow Annadel's work. But again, I appreciate you taking the time and stepping up today to challenge us to be ourselves.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation, Zach.
If today's conversation sparked something in you, here's what I want you to do right now. Pick one strategy, one insight, one small action you heard today, and commit to it this week. Excellence isn't built in moments. It's built in the daily decisions that compound over time. Remember, You're not just building a healthier body or a more successful career. You're building a legacy that will outlast you. And that starts with the standards you set today. Thanks for listening to the Legacy and Longevity Podcast. If this episode was valuable, first subscribe so you never miss an episode. Then leave us a review to help more people find these conversations. And finally, share it with someone who you think needs to hear it. Until next Tuesday, keep raising the bar, keep pushing your limits, and keep stacking days. I'm Zach Dancel. Your legacy starts now.